Sophia Turner sat in her office, staring blankly at the computer screen. The email she had just received from Veronica Lyle, her mother-in-law and the CEO of Lyle Company, was short, curt, and devastating. The subject line read, "Board meeting urgent." Beneath it, a single sentence, "Your presence is required in the conference room immediately." Sophia's heart pounded in her chest, a sickening feeling of dread settling in her stomach. She knew this was coming. Veronica had been angling for this moment for months, ever since Sophia had dared to challenge her on the renewal of a major contract with a prominent luxury retailer. Sophia had spent weeks negotiating the deal, leveraging her connections and business acumen to secure a multi-million-dollar agreement that would have cemented Lyle Company's position as a premier supplier of high-end home furnishings. But Veronica, whose obsession with maintaining control overshadowed her sense of reason, had abruptly canceled the contract in favor of a smaller, less lucrative deal with one of her personal friends, a decision that cost the company millions. Sophia had argued against it, pointing out the financial instability of the friend's company, but Veronica wouldn't hear it. "This is a family business," she had said, her eyes cold and piercing. "And you're not family." Those words echoed in Sophia's mind as she walked toward the conference room, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Employees she had worked alongside for years averted their eyes, pretending to be engrossed in their work. Sophia knew what they were thinking. Veronica had been sowing seeds of doubt about her for months, whispering to anyone who would listen that Sophia was untrustworthy, incompetent, and only interested in the family's wealth. When Sophia reached the conference room, the atmosphere was already thick with tension. The entire board was present, including Ryan, her husband, who sat beside his mother with his eyes fixed on the table. Veronica sat at the head of the table, her perfectly manicured hands resting on a stack of papers. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a glint of satisfaction in her eyes. Sophia took a deep breath and took her seat. Before she could open her mouth, Veronica began. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Veronica said, her voice smooth and authoritative. "As you all know, we recently lost a critical contract with Carson Reed, a deal that would have secured us a 5-year agreement to supply their flagship stores. Unfortunately, that deal fell through, and we're now facing significant financial repercussions." Sophia clenched her fists onto the table. It was a blatant lie. The deal hadn't fallen through. Veronica had sabotaged it, forcing Sophia to abandon the negotiations in favor of a smaller, less stable partnership. But Veronica continued without missing a beat. "The reason we're here today," Veronica said, her gaze fixed squarely on Sophia, "is to discuss accountability. Specifically, the failure of our head of operations to properly handle the Carson Reed contract." A murmur swept through the room. Sophia's cheeks burned. "I didn't fail to handle the contract," she said, her voice firm. "You canceled it. You forced me to." Veronica held up a hand, silencing her. "Please, let me finish," she said, her smile tight and condescending. While Sophia's intentions may have been in the right place, her execution was severely lacking. Her failure to secure the Carson Reed deal has cost this company millions in projected revenue. As CEO, it is my duty to protect this company from further losses. Sophia's jaw clenched. "I didn't fail. You undermined me. This is not a discussion, Sophia," Veronica snapped, her voice icy. "This is a decision. Effective immediately, you are relieved of your position as head of operations." Sophia's heart dropped. The room fell silent. Ryan kept his eyes down, his knuckles white as he gripped the table. He looked like he wanted to speak, but remained silent. Sophia swallowed, forcing herself to remain calm. "You're firing me? I'm giving you the opportunity to step down gracefully," Veronica said, her eyes narrowing. "Take some time to reflect. Perhaps this company was too much for you. Maybe you'd be better suited to less demanding work." The insult was clear. Veronica was suggesting that Sophia, with her MBA and years of experience, was unqualified for the very position she had helped create. Sophia looked around the table. No one met her eyes, not even Ryan. A wave of humiliation washed over her, but she refused to let it show. Instead, She straightened her back and met Veronica's gaze head-on. "I'll clear out my office," she said, her voice cold and controlled. "But this isn't over." Veronica's smile widened. "Of course, dear. Take all the time you need." Sophia stood up, her legs shaking beneath her. She walked out of the conference room with her head held high. But as soon as she was out of sight, her composure crumbled. Tears stung her eyes, and she rushed to the nearest restroom, locking herself inside a stall. She pressed her fists against her forehead, forcing herself to breathe. How could this have happened? How could she have been so blind? She had poured everything into that company, sacrificing her weekends, her health, her relationships, all to prove herself to a family that never wanted her in the first place. And now she was out, just like that. When she finally emerged from the restroom, her eyes red and her hands shaking, she found Ryan waiting for her outside. He looked at her with a mixture of pity and guilt, his shoulders slumped. "Soph," he began, reaching for her hand. Sophia pulled away, the sting of his betrayal sharper than any words Veronica had spoken. "You just sat there," she said, her voice trembling. "You didn't say a word." Ryan's jaw clenched. "What was I supposed to say? She's my mother, and she's the CEO. What could I do?" "You could have stood up for me," Sophia snapped. "You could have told them the truth, that she was the one who canceled the contract, that she's been undermining me for months. But instead, you just sat there and let her destroy me." Ryan's eyes flashed with anger. "I didn't let her do anything. You made your choices, Sophia. You took risks, and they didn't pay off. Maybe she's right. Maybe you were in over your head." Sophia felt the air leave her lungs as if he had punched her. The man she had married, the man she had trusted, was now parroting his mother's words. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She was on her own. Without another word, Sophia turned and walked away, ignoring Ryan's calls behind her. She grabbed her things from her office, shoving them into a cardboard box with shaking hands. As she made her way to the elevator, Veronica appeared in the hallway, her expression smug and victorious. "Leaving so soon?" Veronica asked, her voice dripping with false concern. Sophia met her gaze, her jaw clenched. "You may have one today, but this isn't over," she said, her voice cold and steady. Veronica's smile widened. "Oh, honey, it's already over." The elevator doors closed, and as Sophia descended to the lobby, a sense of calm washed over her. Veronica thought she had one, but she didn't know the full story. Not yet, because while Veronica was busy playing the role of the queen, Sophia had been quietly buying up shares of Lyle Company through a silent partner. And as she stepped out into the cold evening air, Sophia allowed herself a small, dangerous smile. The real game was just beginning. Sophia Turner sat cross-legged on the floor of her sister Mia's tiny apartment, surrounded by boxes of her belongings. The walls were closing in, and the ceiling felt lower than ever. Her world had been reduced to this cramped living room, the hum of the nearby highway serving as a constant reminder of how far she'd fallen. Mia, a kindergarten teacher with a modest salary, had graciously offered her the couch, a gesture that Sophia appreciated more than she could ever express. But the sting of humiliation still burned like a fresh wound. Mia entered the room, carrying 2 cups of coffee, setting one down beside Sophia. "You okay?" she asked gently, lowering herself to the floor. Sophia took the cup and cradled it in her hands. "No," she said honestly, her voice cracking. "I gave that company everything. Every single thing I had. And she tossed me out like I was nothing." Mia reached over and placed a comforting hand on her sister's knee. "You're not nothing, Soph. You're smart and you're capable. You didn't deserve this." Sophia swallowed the lump in her throat. "Ryan didn't even defend me," she whispered. "He just sat there and let her tear me apart. And then he said I was in over my head, that maybe she was right about me. Mia esse jutaitin. What a coward," she muttered. "You deserve so much better than him." "Than him?" Sophia nodded, but said nothing. The betrayal stung like a fresh cut, but she knew she couldn't afford to wallow in her misery for long. Veronica had taken everything from her, but there was still one thing she didn't know: the shares. Sophia set her coffee down and pulled her laptop from one of the boxes. "I need to make a call," she said, opening her email. Mia stood up. I'll give you some space, she said, disappearing into the kitchen. Sophia logged into her encrypted email account and composed a message to James Wu, her lawyer and longtime confidant. James had been helping her quietly acquire shares of Lyle Company for the past year, all under the name of a silent partner. The plan had started as a precaution, a way for Sophia to protect herself in case Veronica ever decided to push her out. But now, it was her only weapon. The subject line read, "Urgent, review shares." The body of the email was brief but precise. "James, I need a full report on all shares acquired through her silent partner. And I need to know how many more we can legally purchase before hitting disclosure thresholds." This isn't a drill. Sophia. She hit send and closed the laptop, exhaling deeply. The plan was in motion. Now, it was just a matter of waiting for James's response. Hours later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sophia's phone buzzed. It was an encrypted text from James. "Check your email. We need to talk." Sophia opened her laptop again, heart pounding as she clicked on the email. James had attached a comprehensive breakdown of the shares she currently controlled through the silent partner. 35% ownership, the largest single stake in the company. Sophia's breath caught in her throat. 35% was substantial, more than enough to sway board decisions. But it wasn't enough to unseat Veronica as CEO, not yet. James's email continued. "Veronica holds 30%, Ryan 10%, and the remaining 25% is scattered among minor shareholders and employees. We could potentially acquire another 5% without triggering disclosure requirements, but it would require careful timing and strategic purchases. Let me know how you want to proceed." Sophia leaned back against the wall, her mind spinning. If she could secure another 5%, she would control 40% of the company, a clear majority over Veronica's 30%. It would be enough to challenge her, to call for a vote of no confidence, and potentially force her out. But how would she get the money? Sophia's savings were already dwindling after the move and without a steady income. That's when she remembered Victor Vargas, a venture capitalist she had met years ago during a networking event. Victor had been interested in Lyle Company, but Veronica had refused to entertain the idea of outside investment. Sophia grabbed her phone and scrolled through her contacts, finding Victor's number. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the call button. If she did this, there was no going back. Veronica would know she was planning something. But the alternative, doing nothing and letting Veronica run the company into the ground, was even worse. Sophia took a deep breath and pressed the button. Victor answered on the second ring. "Sophia Turner," he said smoothly, as if he had been expecting her call. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" "Victor," Sophia said, forcing calm into her voice. "I have a proposition for you. Are you still interested in acquiring a stake in Lyle Company?" There was a brief pause, and then Victor chuckled. "Are you saying Veronica Lyle is finally open to outside investors?" "Not exactly," Sophia said, her jaw clenched. "But I am." Victor's interest was piqued. "Go on." Sophia outlined her plan, explaining how she had quietly acquired 35% of the shares through a silent partner and how she intended to secure an additional 5% to take control of the board. Victor listened in silence, his sharp mind calculating the risks and rewards. "And what's in it for me?" he asked finally. "You help me secure the remaining 5%, and I give you a seat on the board," Sophia said. "Plus, you get first refusal on any additional shares I acquire in the future. It's a win-win." Victor was silent for a moment, and Sophia's heart hammered in her chest. Finally, he spoke. "You've got yourself a deal, but I want it in writing. Send over the paperwork, and we'll get this moving. But, Sophia," he added, his tone serious, "you'd better be ready to fight. Veronica won't go down without a war." Sophia ended the call and leaned back against the wall, her chest rising and falling as adrenaline coursed through her veins. It was done. The pieces were in place. But now, she had to move fast. The next morning, Sophia met with James at his office, the windows overlooking the skyline of the city. "Victor agreed to back me," she said, pacing the room. "But we need to move quickly before Veronica catches wind of what we're doing." James nodded. "I'll draft the necessary agreements, and get them to you by tomorrow morning. But Sophia, once you cross the 40% threshold, Veronica will know. She's not stupid. She'll come after you with everything she has. Sophia, stop pacing and look James directly in the eye. Let her. She's taken everything from me. My job, my reputation, my husband's loyalty. This time, I'm taking something back. James leaned forward, his expression serious. You realize that once you initiate the takeover, it's all or nothing. If you lose, Veronica will crush you. She'll make sure you never work in this industry again. Sophia's jaw clenched. I'm not going to lose, she said, her voice hard as steel. Not this time. James nodded, pulling a stack of documents from his briefcase. Then let's get to work. For the next several hours, Sophia and James meticulously combed through financial records, identifying vulnerable shareholders, employees who might be willing to sell their shares, and potential allies on the board. Each piece was a part of the puzzle, each move a calculated risk. By the time the sun set, Sophia had a clear plan of attack. Victor would provide the funds, James would handle the legal maneuvering, and Sophia would execute the takeover with precision and ruthless efficiency. As she left James's office and stepped out into the cold night air, Sophia felt a surge of adrenaline pulse through her veins. The battle had begun, and this time, she was playing to win. Sophia Turner stepped into the gleaming marble lobby of Lyle Company, her heels echoing against the cold, polished floor. The building hadn't changed in the weeks since she'd been unceremoniously thrown out. The same towering windows, the same gold-plated logo glistening on the far wall, the same receptionist who avoided eye contact as she strode past them. But something was different now. This time, she wasn't here as the disgraced former head of operations. This time, she was here as the largest shareholder in the company. The board meeting was already in session when she reached the top floor. Behind the closed double doors, she could hear Veronica's voice, smooth, commanding, and dripping with false charm. Sophia squared her shoulders, tightened her grip on the leather-bound folder in her hand, and pushed the doors open without knocking. Inside, the entire board of directors sat around the long, oval table. Veronica Lyle was at the head, her blonde hair swept into a severe chignon, her manicured nails drumming lightly against the polished wood. Ryan sat beside her, his jaw tense, eyes fixed on the table. He didn't look up when Sophia entered. Veronica's eyes narrowed as Sophia walked in. "Sophia," she said, her voice dripping with insincere sweetness. "To what do we owe this unexpected visit?" Sophia smiled, a calm, collected smile that masked the storm raging inside her. "I think you'll find my presence more than justified," she said, moving to the head of the table and setting her folder down. "I'd like to call for a vote of no confidence in Veronica Lyle as CEO of Lyle Company." Gasps echoed around the room. Veronica's smile faltered, but she quickly regained her composure. "You can't be serious," she said, her voice sharp. "You don't even have the authority to call for such a vote." Sophia's smile widened. "Actually, I do." She opened the folder and pulled out a series of documents, each bearing her name and the signatures of newly acquired shareholders. "As of this morning, I own 40% of Lyle Company, the largest shareholding in the company. That gives me not only the right to call for a vote, but also the power to remove you as CEO." Veronica's face blanched, her perfectly painted lips pressing into a thin, furious line. "This is outrageous," she snapped, her eyes darting to Ryan. "Ryan, are you just going to sit there and let her do this?" Ryan swallowed, his eyes flicking between his mother and his wife. His hands trembled slightly under the table. "Sophie," Sophia cut him off. "Save it," she said, her voice cold as ice. "This isn't about you, Ryan. This is about the company. A company that your mother has been running into the ground for years while lining her own pockets with shareholders' money." Veronica shot to her feet, her chair scraping back violently. "How dare you?" she hissed. "I built this company. I made it what it is. You're just an outsider, a nobody. You were nothing before you married my son, and you're nothing now." Sophia met Veronica's glare without flinching. "You built this company? Or did you inherit it from your father and run it into the ground with reckless spending and nepotism. Veronica's nostrils flared, but she said nothing. Sophia turned to the board members, each of whom was watching the confrontation with wide, uncertain eyes. "I have documentation here," Sophia said, holding up a series of financial statements that shows how Veronica has been funneling company funds into private accounts under the guise of business expenses. Thousands of dollars in unexplained withdrawals, all tied to personal accounts in offshore banks. The board members began whispering among themselves, exchanging shocked and uneasy glances. Ryan's face had gone pale, his eyes fixed on the documents in Sophia's hand. "That's a lie," Veronica said, but her voice lacked its usual strength. "Those are legitimate expenses. I was protecting the company." "Protecting it?" Sophia repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Or draining it? Because according to these records, you withdrew over $500,000 in the past 6 months alone. Money that was meant for operational costs and employee bonuses. Money that never made it back into the company accounts." A heavy silence fell over the room. Sophia stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Veronica's. "You fired me, Veronica. You humiliated me in front of everyone, painted me as incompetent, and blamed me for your own failures. But while you were busy plotting my downfall, I was quietly buying up shares. I own 40% of Lyle Company now. And with that, I'm calling for a vote to remove you as CEO." Veronica's eyes flashed with fury. "You think you could just walk in here and take what's mine?" She sneered. "You think these people are going to side with you? You're nothing without me. You hear me? Nothing." Sophia straightened her back, her gaze cold and unwavering. "We'll see about that. Let the vote begin." One by one, the board members cast their votes. The tension in the room was palpable, the air heavy with anticipation. Ryan hesitated, his eyes darting to his mother, then to Sophia. Sweat beaded on his forehead. When his turn came, he cleared his throat and said, I abstain." Sophia's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. The vote continued, each board member casting their ballot. When it was over, James Wu, who had been silently observing in the corner, stood and cleared his throat. "The vote is 6-4 in favor of removing Veronica Lyle as CEO," he announced. Effective immediately, the board has elected Sophia Turner as the new CEO of Lyle Company. Veronica's face twisted with rage, her eyes wild and furious. "This isn't over," she shouted, slamming her fists on the table. "You think you can take my company from me? You'll regret this, Sophia. You hear me? You'll regret it." Sophia picked up her folder, calmly placing the documents back inside. She looked at Veronica, her expression cool and collected. "The only thing I regret," she said, her voice steady, "is not doing this sooner." Veronica stormed out of the room, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. The door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing in the silent room. Sophia took a deep breath and turned to the board members, all of whom were watching her with wary, uncertain eyes. "Thank you for your votes of confidence," she said, her voice firm. "My first order of business as CEO will be to conduct a full audit of all financial transactions over the past 2 years. Anyone found complicit in Veronica's schemes will be held accountable." Ryan finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. "Soph, can we talk?" he said, his voice small. Sophia met his gaze, her expression unreadable. "Not now," she said, turning away. "I have a company to run." And with that, she walked out of the boardroom, leaving Ryan and the rest of them in her wake. For the first time in her life, Sophia felt powerful, but she knew that her battle with Veronica was far from over. The real fight was just beginning. Sophia Turner leaned back in her leather chair, the weight of her newfound power settling heavily across her shoulders. The office that once belonged to Veronica Lyle was now hers, a fact made evident by the absence of Veronica's opulent decorations, the gold-plated photo frames, the garish crystal vases filled with roses that Veronica never touched but always demanded be replaced weekly. The room felt empty, sterile even, but Sophia preferred it that way. She needed a clean slate, a new beginning. It had been 2 weeks since the explosive board meeting where she had ousted Veronica as CEO. Since then, Sophia had been working around the clock, poring over financial records, contracts, and employee files, trying to undo the damage Veronica had inflicted. The deeper she dug, the more corruption she uncovered. Unauthorized expenses, falsified financial statements, and worst of all, a series of shell companies Veronica had been funneling money into under fictitious employee names. Sophia pressed her fingers to her temples, feeling the pressure building behind her eyes. Sleep had become a distant memory. Every day, more skeletons fell out of the Lyle family closet, and each one brought more chaos to her already crumbling marriage. Ryan had barely spoken to her since the vote, his expression blank, his eyes dull and distant. He had moved into a guest bedroom, and their once shared bed now felt as cold and empty as her new office. A knock on the door snapped her out her thoughts. "Come in," she called, her voice sharper than she intended. James Wu entered, carrying a thick stack of documents. "Sophia," he said, his tone grim. "You need to see this." Sophia gestured for him to sit, her stomach twisting with dread. "What now?" James set the stack down on the desk and slid a single document toward her. "This is a subpoena," he said. "Veronica is suing for wrongful termination. She claims you falsified documents to discredit her and that you conspired to defraud her of her rightful place as CEO." Sophia's jaw clenched. "She's lying." "I know," James said, leaning forward. "But she's claiming that you used insider information to acquire those shares and that you manipulated the board into voting her out under false pretenses. She's seeking reinstatement and full financial compensation for damages to her reputation." Sophia picked up the document, her eyes scanning the lines of legal jargon. Veronica had hired a high-powered attorney known for his ruthless tactics and aggressive litigation style. "She's desperate," Sophia said, tossing the paper back onto the desk. "She's losing everything, and she can't handle it." James nodded. "There's more," he said, sliding another document toward her. "We pulled the records from those shell companies you flagged. Veronica wasn't just funneling money to herself. She was paying off board members, bribes disguised as consulting fees and bonuses." Sophia's blood ran cold. "Who?" James flipped open the folder, revealing a list of names, several board members who had voted against her during the meeting. "That's how she was holding on to power," James said. "She was buying their votes. But now that you've removed her, they're all scrambling to cover their tracks. A couple of them are already in talks with Veronica's attorney, claiming they were coerced by you to flip their votes in your favor." Sophia's chest tightened. "This is a setup," she said. "She's trying to make it look like I'm the one who's corrupt, that I manipulated the board and stole the company out from under her." James nodded. "That's exactly what she's doing. And if she convinces a judge, you could lose everything. The shares, the company, even your reputation. You need to get ahead of this, Sophia." Sophia took a deep breath, forcing herself to think clearly. "What about Ryan?" she asked. "Has he said anything?" James hesitated. "Not directly, but he's been meeting with Veronica almost every day since the vote. If she convinces him to testify against you, it could be a serious blow to your case." Sophia's throat tightened. The thought of Ryan, her husband, aligning himself with the woman who had spent years undermining her was almost too much to bear. But then again, Ryan had always been under his mother's thumb. Why would he stop now? Sophia stood up, moving to the window and staring out at the city skyline. The air outside was thick with rain, the streets below slick and glistening under the streetlights. The city felt like a maze of secrets and lies, each turn more treacherous than the last. "James," she said, her voice steady, "prepare a counterclaim. If Veronica wants to drag me to court, fine. But we're not just defending ourselves. We're going after her for fraud, embezzlement, and bribery. I want every single transaction tracked, every shell company exposed. And as for those board members, I want them on record. If they took a bribe, they're going down with her." James's eyes gleamed with approval. "Now that's the Sophia I know." Sophia nodded, her jaw set. "And as for Ryan," she said, her voice hardening, "arrange a meeting. I need to know where he stands, with me or with her." Hours later, Sophia sat alone in her office, the room dark except for the dim glow of her computer screen. The rain had intensified, pounding against the windows like an angry symphony. The sound filled the empty space, echoing around her like a reminder of everything she had lost. The door creaked open, and Ryan stepped inside, his hair soaked, his clothes clinging to his body. He looked like a man who had been caught in a storm, both inside and out. Sophia didn't turn around. "What do you want, Ryan?" Ryan took a shaky breath, his eyes fixed on the back of her chair. "I spoke to Mom," he said, his voice small. "She said you're trying to ruin her, that you're lying about the money, the shell companies. She says you set her up." Sophia spun around, her eyes flashing with anger. "Are you serious right now? You've seen the evidence, Ryan. You know what she did." Ryan ran a hand through his wet hair, his jaw clenched. "She's my mother, sophomore. I can't just abandon her." "And what about me?" Sophia demanded, standing up. "I'm your wife. Or did you forget that?" Ryan's eyes dropped to the floor. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he whispered. Sophia's heart shattered, but she forced herself to remain strong. "Well, you'd better decide quickly," she said, her voice cold. "Because this isn't just about the company anymore. It's about everything. Our marriage, our future. And if you side with her, don't expect to come crawling back when she dragged you down with her." Ryan swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I need time to think." Sophia shook her head, her expression hardening. "Time's up, Ryan. You either stand with me, or you stand against me. But make no mistake, I will take her down. And if you're in my way, I won't hesitate to take you down too." Ryan's face crumpled, but he said nothing. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the door closing behind him with a final, resounding click. Sophia stood there, her hands shaking, her chest heaving with adrenaline and grief. The love of her life had chosen the woman who had destroyed her over the woman he vowed to love and protect. But as the rain continued to pour outside, Sophia straightened her back and returned to her desk. There was no time for tears, no room for second-guessing. Veronica, Lyle wanted a war, and Sophia Turner was going to give her one.